I still remember the day Grandpa handed me that envelope, like it was the most important thing in the world. He had this mischievous grin plastered across his face, the kind that always meant trouble, and I couldn't tell if he was serious or just messing with me. I tore it open slowly, feeling my pulse quicken, and my eyes fell on a check with my name written neatly across it. "Here you go, just for you," he said, chuckling under his breath. My parents erupted into laughter the moment they saw it, pointing at me like I was the punchline of some elaborate joke. "Oh, don't get too excited, you gullible fool," my mom teased, waving her hand dramatically. My dad nodded, trying not to laugh so hard he spit coffee everywhere. The room smelled faintly of old books and Sunday roast, the usual comfort of home, yet in that instant, it felt like I was being put on display. Grandpa's eyes twinkled, daring me to believe it, while my parents' amusement made it clear I was the source of entertainment. I stared at the check, unsure if I should laugh or get offended, the absurdity of it mixing with a strange flicker of hope in my chest. Something about the way my family always seemed to favor my cousin over me, always laughing at my expense, stung more than it should have. I folded the check carefully, pretending to examine it, even though inside I was boiling with embarrassment and curiosity all at once. Grandpa leaned back, satisfied with his little prank, as if he knew something I didn't. And yet, even in the laughter and teasing, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't going to be just another family joke, that maybe, just maybe, this fake check might be the first step in turning everything I thought I knew upside down. The tension between their amusement and my cautious intrigue filled the room, setting the stage for a story I had no idea I was about to live. As soon as the laughter died down, a small, insistent thought started gnawing at me. What if the check wasn't fake? I shook my head quickly, trying to dismiss it. That would be ridiculous, right? Grandpa had a long history of pranks, and my parents had already made it abundantly clear that believing him was the height of gullibility. Still, the thought lingered, stubborn and unwelcome, curling in the back of my mind like smoke I couldn't fully blow away. I found myself staring at the check over and over, pretending to study it while my parents chatted about something trivial in the next room. Their casual disregard made me feel small, like I was always on the outside of their attention, never quite the one to be taken seriously. I imagined what it would feel like to hold real proof of my worth, even if it was just a piece of paper. The idea of being respected, even slightly, was intoxicating, though I couldn't let anyone see that desire. Laughing along with them while secretly entertaining the possibility became a delicate performance, a balancing act between hiding my hope and not becoming the butt of their joke. I thought about how often I'd been overlooked, dismissed, or underestimated, and a quiet fire began to grow inside me. Maybe this check, whether real or fake, could be a way to finally assert myself, to be noticed for more than just being the gullible kid. But the fear of ridicule was strong, stronger than curiosity in that moment. I folded the check into my pocket, feeling its weight, and told myself it was nothing, just a silly prank, like always. Yet my mind kept spinning through scenarios, imagining what would happen if, somehow, this tiny slip of paper turned into something more. I imagined the shock on their faces, the way my parents might squirm, and even the smallest possibility of earning respect made my stomach tighten with anticipation. I didn't dare voice a word of it, though. I laughed along when they joked, nodded when they teased, and kept my thoughts carefully locked away, silently wishing someone, anyone, would see me differently. I couldn't stop thinking about the check all night. By the next morning, curiosity had taken over any lingering embarrassment, and I decided I had to see for myself if there was even a shred of truth to it. I told myself it was just to satisfy my own doubt, nothing more, yet my heart was pounding with a mixture of excitement and fear as I walked into the bank. The lobby smelled faintly of polished wood and antiseptic, and the quiet hum of computers and low chatter felt almost ceremonial, like stepping into a place where secrets were revealed. I approached the teller's window, my hand slightly trembling as I placed the check on the counter. She glanced at it and then at me, her expression subtle but unreadable. I felt a twinge of unease as her eyes lingered a moment longer than expected, a barely perceptible arch of an eyebrow giving me pause. "Just to confirm," she said, her tone polite but careful. "Is this your account?" I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. As she typed into her terminal, My mind raced through possibilities, each one more improbable than the last. Was this going to be a disaster? A mistake? Or could it actually be real? Every fiber of my being seemed to tingle with anticipation, a mix of fear and hope battling inside me. The faint beep of the computer key sounded louder than it should have, marking each second like a drumbeat in a suspenseful scene I hadn't agreed to act in. I couldn't help but notice the subtle glances from other customers, the quiet pause in the routine, as if the air itself had thickened around this tiny, innocuous slip of paper. The teller's fingers hesitated above the keyboard, and my stomach nodded. What if this was some kind of error, a false promise that would explode in my face? I forced myself to breathe slowly, trying to calm the rapid heartbeat in my chest, while the teller finally leaned back slightly, her eyes meeting mine with an intensity that made me swallow hard. That moment stretched, each second dripping with suspense, until the next word she spoke would change everything. When the teller finally spoke, her voice calm but certain, it felt like someone had yanked the floor from under me. "This check is valid," she said, sliding it back across the counter. I froze, my mind struggling to process the words, as if they were being spoken in a foreign language. My first reaction was disbelief, the kind that makes your chest tighten and your mouth go dry. Could this really be happening? I thought back to my parents laughing at me just yesterday, mocking my gullibility, making me feel small and naive. My cousins smirking in the corner, my siblings whispering jokes at my expense. They all seemed so certain I would never be taken seriously. And now this undeniable proof, sat in front of me, validating everything I had dared to imagine in secret. I felt a jolt of something new, a mixture of vindication and cautious excitement, like standing at the edge of a cliff and realizing you could actually fly. My hands shook slightly as I held the check, the paper suddenly heavier than it had ever seemed in Grandpa's hands. I imagined the faces of my parents when I returned home, their laughter frozen on their lips, the smug expressions replaced by something else. Shock, embarrassment, maybe even regret. The thought gave me a strange thrill, one I hadn't felt in years, as if I had quietly been underestimated all my life. And now, finally, I had proof that I was not as powerless as they believed. I tucked the check carefully into my bag, my mind spinning through every conversation, every teasing remark, every dismissal I had endured. They had thought me naive, weak, and gullible. But I was holding the undeniable truth, a quiet triumph that none of them had anticipated. And in that instant, I realized that nothing would ever feel the same again. I walked through the front door, trying to act casual like any other ordinary day, even though my mind was racing and my heart felt unusually light. My parents were in the kitchen, mid-laugh over some trivial story, completely unaware of the storm I carried in my bag. I placed the check on the table, letting it slide into view as if it were no big deal. "So, I went to the bank," I said casually, my voice calm, hiding the tremor of excitement underneath. Their laughter froze instantly. My mom's eyes widened. My dad's hand paused mid-air as he reached for his coffee, and even my siblings stopped their teasing conversation mid-sentence. The room fell into an awkward silence, thick with disbelief and embarrassment. My parents glanced at each other, murmuring under their breath, trying to downplay the situation, their earlier confidence eroding in real time. "Well, that's interesting," my mom stammered, forcing a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. My dad cleared his throat, pretending to scan a newspaper, but I could see the flush creeping up his neck. I felt a quiet thrill bubble up inside me, a slow burn of empowerment spreading through my chest. For once I wasn't the gullible one. I wasn't being laughed at. I had the upper hand, and even if they didn't fully realize it yet, the roles had shifted. I could feel it in the way they avoided my eyes, the subtle tension in their posture, and the hesitant pauses in their attempts to dismiss the truth. Every glance, every careful word they muttered only strengthened the rush of satisfaction building in me. I had been underestimated, ignored, even mocked, for as long as I could remember. But now the balance had shifted ever so slightly, and that feeling, that quiet, simmering empowerment, was intoxicating. As I sat in my room later that evening, I found myself thinking back to all the times my family had overlooked me, the countless moments when my efforts had gone unnoticed while others received praise or attention. I remembered staying up late to finish school projects that no one bothered to ask about, earning awards quietly that were barely acknowledged, and volunteering to help relatives only to have my contributions dismissed or forgotten. My cousin, of course, received endless accolades for the smallest achievements, while I was expected to blend into the background, a permanent shadow at every family gathering. I thought about the time I had organized the entire holiday dinner, only for my parents to heap thanks on my sister for setting the table. The sting of those moments resurfaced, sharp and familiar, and yet beneath it all, I realized how much resilience and competence I had quietly built. For years I had been proving myself silently, honing skills and gathering knowledge that no one believed I possessed. It was almost laughable in retrospect, how thoroughly they had underestimated me, how completely blind they were to my potential. That fake check now seemed almost symbolic, a mirror reflecting everything they had ignored. And as I reflected on these memories, I felt a surge of empathy, not just for myself, but for anyone who had ever been minimized, dismissed, or overlooked in their own family. The quiet injustices, the favoritism that had marked my childhood, suddenly seemed vivid and undeniable, fueling a simmering determination to step out of the shadows and claim recognition on my own terms. In those flashbacks, every slight, every dismissal, every laugh at my expense built the foundation for the person I had become, someone ready to quietly assert themselves and finally command the attention I had always deserved. Sitting alone later that night, I traced the edges of the check with my fingertips, my mind spinning with possibilities I hadn't dared to voice before. I knew I couldn't gloat or confront my family outright. It would only confirm their belief that I was foolish, petty, or childish. So instead, I began to think strategically, imagining ways to assert my independence quietly, to carve out a space where my accomplishments and worth could no longer be ignored. I pictured subtle shifts in daily interactions, speaking with more confidence at family gatherings, making decisions that affected shared resources without waiting for approval, or handling financial matters in ways that would gradually reveal my competence. The thrill of this quiet power sent a shiver down my spine, a heady mixture of anticipation and nervous energy. My internal monologue became a careful roadmap, mapping out scenarios in which my family would begin to recognize that I was capable, intelligent, and deserving of respect. Each plan was small but deliberate, a word here, a gesture there, designed to slowly change the dynamics that had long favored others. I imagined moments when they would glance at me and pause, the realization dawning that their assumptions about me had been completely wrong. Deep down, the desire for justice and recognition burned hotter than pride. It wasn't revenge for the sake of cruelty, but a need to correct years of oversight and dismissal. I thought about how satisfying it would feel to have my family finally acknowledge my worth. Not because I demanded it, but because it had become undeniable. The quiet plotting continued late into the night, a mental chess game where each subtle move would gradually shift the balance, leaving me not only validated, but empowered in ways I had only dreamed of before. Over the next few weeks, I began to notice the subtle shifts, little victories that felt almost clandestine. It started with minor financial decisions, being able to pay for errands, help cover small bills, or offer solutions that previously would have been dismissed outright. Each time I quietly took the initiative, my parents and siblings blinked in surprise, a fraction of hesitation crossing their faces before they masked it with casual nods. At family dinners, I found myself speaking up with suggestions that actually got implemented, and the first time someone followed one of my ideas without question, I felt a quiet rush of validation. Even my cousins, who had long overshadowed me, started asking for advice on trivial matters, as if suddenly my opinion carried weight. These were not grand gestures of revenge or sweeping public displays, but the accumulation of small acknowledgments, tiny power reversals that built momentum. My voice carried a subtle authority that had been absent before, and I could see the unease in my family's eyes when they realized they could no longer dismiss me so easily. I also discovered hidden talents, skills I had honed quietly, that began to draw attention. Whether it was organizing a minor family event flawlessly or handling a tricky situation with poise, I noticed the way people started to look at me differently. It was intoxicating, this slow inversion of power, this realization that I could finally stand on equal footing with those who had always underestimated me. Each small success fed the quiet thrill inside, confirming that the underestimated child of yesterday was quietly becoming the one to watch, and that validation, even in subtle increments, could feel sweeter than any public triumph. The weekend brought the family gathering I had been quietly anticipating, the one where all the laughter, teasing, and dismissiveness would finally collide with reality. I arrived carrying a calm demeanor, deliberately unassuming, letting my family assume nothing had changed. The chatter was familiar. My parents boasting about my cousin's latest success, siblings exchanging inside jokes at my expense. But I tuned it out, my mind focused on the subtle plan I had been crafting. When the right moment arrived, I casually mentioned a new investment opportunity I had stumbled upon, letting curiosity draw their attention. I spoke slowly, deliberately, allowing the weight of my words to settle like a cloud over the conversation. Then almost offhandedly I revealed the truth. The check Grandpa had given me, the one they all laughed at, had been real, and I had used it strategically to make decisions that had significantly improved my financial position. There was a stunned silence. My cousin choked mid-sentence. My parents' jaws dropped, and my siblings froze, unsure whether to laugh nervously or ask questions. I watched them squirm, each expression of disbelief and embarrassment feeding a quiet satisfaction that felt almost righteous. The windfall wasn't ostentatious. No flashy cars or loud announcements. But the way I had quietly turned their mockery into tangible evidence of my capability was undeniable. Their smug certainty, the same confidence that had allowed them to underestimate me for years, crumbled in a matter of seconds, replaced with awkward glances and whispered apologies. I felt a surge of empowerment, a mix of vindication and subtle triumph, knowing that I had orchestrated a moment that left them questioning every assumption they had ever made about me. And as the gathering continued, every cautious compliment and hesitant acknowledgement served as a reminder that the underestimated child they once mocked had quietly rewritten the rules of respect within our family. That day, I realized that the true power of the check wasn't the money itself. It was the control, the recognition, and the unspoken acknowledgement that I was finally being seen. Later that evening, after most of the guests had left, I overheard my parents and siblings talking quietly in the living room. The tone was different, lower, hesitant, tinged with embarrassment. "I can't believe we laughed at them," my mom whispered, shaking her head. "All this time, and we never realized." My dad's voice was heavy, filled with quiet regret. "We really underestimated them. Every time we dismissed their ideas, I thought it was harmless, but now..." There was a pause, filled with the weight of their own mistakes. My siblings murmured in agreement, voices soft, almost ashamed. "I always thought they were naive, but they've been so patient, so smart," one admitted, barely above a whisper. And that check. It wasn't just luck. They turned it into something bigger. We didn't see it coming. I listened, a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness stirring inside me. They weren't shouting or begging for forgiveness, just quietly acknowledging their oversight, realizing they had misjudged me for years. Hearing their humility, their recognition of my worth finally verbalized, sent a deep sense of closure through me. I could feel the balance subtly shifting, the respect I had longed for now quietly settling into place. And though they hadn't said it directly to me yet, I knew they would never view me the same way again. After the family had retreated to their rooms and the house quieted, I found myself alone with my thoughts, the events of the day settling around me like a soft, warm glow. The sense of triumph I felt was subtle, not the kind that required applause or recognition, but the quiet satisfaction of having been underestimated and proven right. I thought about how long I had carried the weight of doubt, the small humiliations and the constant comparisons, and now, for the first time, there was a balance. I was finally being seen for who I truly was. The check, once a joke, had become a symbol not just of financial gain, but of resilience, patience, and strategic thinking. I smiled softly, realizing that power didn't have to be loud to be meaningful. This new confidence wasn't about arrogance. It was a calm understanding of my own worth, a certainty that I could navigate challenges and command respect without demanding it. I reflected on every small victory from the past weeks, the subtle shifts in family dynamics, the acknowledgement of my ideas, the careful navigation of their disbelief. and felt a swell of pride that was tempered by humility. The journey had taught me patience, foresight, and the quiet power of proving oneself without fanfare. As I leaned back in the chair, letting the relief and empowerment wash over me, I understood the catharsis the audience might feel in moments like this. The validation of effort, the satisfaction of justice served without cruelty, and the emotional release of seeing a long-overlooked individual finally recognized. The mix of relief, pride, and quiet joy was intoxicating. A personal victory I didn't need to flaunt, but one that changed how I carried myself and how the world would now regard me. I realized I had grown, not just in status, but in understanding, compassion, and the power of measured patience. A week later, I decided it was time to put my quiet planning into action, to assert my independence in a way that was both clever and satisfying. I didn't want grand gestures or dramatic confrontations, just small, precise moves that would leave a lasting impression without tipping into arrogance. At the next family dinner, I casually suggested a new arrangement for splitting household expenses and handling family errands, framing it as a helpful proposal rather than a power play. My parents hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the confidence in my tone, but I pressed on gently, presenting small examples of how it would make life easier for everyone. I could feel the subtle shift in their demeanor. The same people who had mocked me for every minor misstep were now looking to me for guidance. Later, when my cousin asked for advice on a personal investment, I offered insight drawn from the check's unexpected windfall, framing it as a tip rather than a lesson. The irony wasn't lost on me. The very source of their earlier laughter had become my tool for influence, and they were willingly following my lead. Each exchange, each nod of reluctant acknowledgement, felt like a small victory, a quiet reversal of the old dynamics. Humor threaded through these moments, too. I'd make sly, witty remarks about past assumptions, delivered so lightly that they couldn't protest without seeming petty. By the end of the evening, the house was buzzing with an unspoken awareness. The underestimated family member had quietly taken control, not through confrontation, but through cleverness, composure, and the subtle use of newfound respect and financial leverage. It was satisfying in a way that words couldn't fully capture. The gentle, strategic payback of someone who had been dismissed for too long, now asserting independence and earning acknowledgement without ever raising a voice. Days later, I found myself thinking about Grandpa, the quiet architect of this entire chain of events. His mischievous grin when he handed me that fake check now seemed almost prophetic, a subtle nudge designed to test my patience, wit, and resilience. I realized he had seen something in me that no one else had, a spark of intelligence and determination that my family consistently overlooked. At the next casual visit, I mentioned how I had used the check strategically, watching as his eyes twinkled with approval, a knowing smile spreading across his face. My parents and siblings, overhearing the story, finally seemed to grasp the depth of the situation, their faces a mixture of astonishment and belated respect. Grandpa always knew what he was doing, didn't he? My sister admitted, half laughing, half in awe. It was a rare moment of humility, a collective recognition that the prank had never been about money. It had been about seeing me, challenging me, and allowing me to rise quietly without anyone realizing it. That full-circle realization settled in like a gentle warmth, a reminder that intelligence, patience, and subtle strategy often triumph over loud arrogance. I smiled, feeling a quiet, validated pride, knowing that at last, my family saw me clearly as the house finally settled into quiet. I sat alone in the living room, the remnants of laughter and whispered conversations fading into memory. The events of the past weeks replayed in my mind like a carefully edited film. Grandpa's prank, the laughter that once stung, the unexpected validation from the bank, and the subtle shifts that had changed the family dynamic forever. I felt a wave of vindication wash over me, not loud or vengeful, but calm, deliberate, and deeply satisfying. I had been underestimated, dismissed, and laughed at for years, yet here I was, quietly empowered, respected, and finally recognized. The sense of validation was intoxicating, yet tempered by humility, knowing that the balance of family dynamics was delicate and ever-shifting. I couldn't help but smile at the lingering irony, remembering their shocked faces, the whispered apologies, and the subtle glances that betrayed a newfound respect. There was humor in it all, too. The absurdity of being underestimated over something as trivial as a check, only to have it reveal layers of intelligence and strategy they had never suspected. Even in victory, there was reflection. The lessons learned about patience, subtlety, and quiet resilience would stay with me forever. I leaned back, savoring the mixture of relief, pride, and lingering amusement, knowing that this chapter had closed in a way that was both satisfying and bittersweet, leaving a lasting imprint on both myself and those who had doubted me.